Greetings Internet friends, AJ here from 8-Bit Horse, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to be doing a review of the newest addition to the 8-Bit Horse game room, the Xtension Upright Arcade Cabinet. That shiny little guy right there. So, for many gamers, myself included, the dream was and is to have an arcade cabinet in your house, in your game room, especially those of us who grew up playing arcade games in the height of the arcade frenzy in the early 80s. To be able to play some of those games in your house with a real arcade stick and all that kind of thing is what you really, really want. So, I looked for a long time. I've been to auctions to buy arcade units, so even to just get a unit that's got a single game in it, or to get a gutted unit that I could mount my own PC into and play things like that, or play console games on. For a long time I was looking for something that I could put into the game room that wasn't going to cost me a lot of money. You can go online and for a couple $1,000 get a completely outfitted system to your specifications. But I wanted to get something that had the full capability but was not going to cost a tremendous amount of money. So I started looking into arcade kits, and what I ended up settling on was the Rec Room Masters 32-inch upright arcade cabinet. So I did a lot of research before I bought this thing. I found out that a lot of the arcade cabinets, like a typical setup, is a 24-inch monitor, which isn't really that big when it comes to an arcade. I mean, a lot of the older arcades had a vertically oriented monitor, so they were a very narrow form factor. But I wanted something that was big, that was wide, and most importantly, that I could have two players simultaneously. So the 32-inch format was the way I decided to go, and one of the ways I saved money was, instead of buying a 32-inch computer monitor, which is a lot of money, I just bought a 32-inch HD TV that's got HDMI hookups and regular video hookups and that kind of thing. So that's a whole lot less expensive. The one I got was $159, and since I'm playing older games anyway, it's a much higher resolution than you even need. It's only like a 720p signal, but that's still way higher than classic arcade games and things like that. So it had everything that I needed. It's not ideal as a computer monitor, but for an arcade monitor, it's just fine. And obviously, it's less expensive. The other thing that I decided to do here was, instead of go with the X-Arcade Tank Stick, which is the main stick that folks tend to go with on arcade cabinets, I mean that they're the big manufacturer out there, I went with the one that Rec Room Masters sells along with the kit. It is a little bit more expensive on its own than a tank stick. You can get a tank stick. This kit comes with an adapter to get it to fit right in so it doesn't stick out, it doesn't look strange on the cabinet. But for me, that design, I just wasn't a giant fan of the design, either from an aesthetic standpoint. I wanted something that was a little shallower and was wider. I wanted to be able to play two-player games, and I wanted a lot of elbow room. I wanted to be able to get in and have two people playing side by side and not really be crowding each other. So the one that Rec Room Master sells with this kit is a very wide stick. It's actually slightly wider than the cabinet. It's pretty shallow, so you're very close to the screen, and it's got buttons for all the things that you would need to do. It's pre-configured for MAME, so if you're doing emulation, it's got coin adds, it's got player 1, player 2, all the features that you would need to get in there. You can exit out, you can access the menus, and then it's got two BAT-style controllers with 10 buttons for each player, and it has a trackball, so Missile Command, Centipede, those kind of games will work in here. You can also buy extra kits for light guns, which work similar to the Wii, where it has a sensor bar, and you just calibrate it by aiming it at the corners of the screen, so light gun games can be played in this type of a unit. And steering wheels as well. That's probably the one thing that I miss from this sort of setup is I would like to be able to have a steering wheel and pedals, because I do like a lot of the racing games. So as far as the review goes, the one thing I would have to say about this system that was a problem was the assembly. So it's supposed to take two people. It's nearly impossible to put together with a single person. It's supposed to take two people a couple of hours to assemble this thing. And, you know, the product is made in America, so I'm like, yes, you're going to have nice English instructions that'll be easy to understand. And so a couple of issues. One, so this is one of the sheets from the instruction manual. It just comes as printed sheets in the box. So there are a couple of issues with the instructions. One is that the pieces aren't all labeled properly. So there's a layout of all the pieces. Those are fine. But in the assembly instructions, like the one I've got here, step 4, it says parts needed. You need part 3, which is the base, the bottom piece. Fantastic. And then the first sentence says take part 5 and plug it into part 1. It's like, well, where's part 3? And you look in the image that goes along with it, and it's not part 5. They basically just told you to put the wrong piece on there. Now, it won't work. I mean, if you try to plug the wrong piece in there, it's clearly not where it's supposed to go. So you'll figure it out, but it's just that kind of thing. It's like, I mean, literally the 4th step in the process, and it's like, this is not the right piece. Clearly, this tiny little narrow piece is not the bottom of the arcade unit. So I skipped ahead to the next instruction and realized where I needed to go. The other thing that is really painful in the assembly of this is the order of operations in the instruction. So there's a lot of steps where the reason you need a second person is because you're building it laying on its side. So you put one side on the floor, and then you're building all the shelves and whatnot up from there. And there's little dowels to kind of hold them in place. But the order of operations has you doing things where one person's just standing there holding all the pieces, and somebody else is doing something completely different. That could have been an earlier step. So, for instance, to mount the monitor in here, you have a board that's got slits through the back of it, and you need to put some spacers in, screw the monitor to the board. But that happens several steps into the process. So while you're on the floor screwing the monitor in, the other person's just standing there holding all of the boards up. There's no reason why that step shouldn't have been first. You do that before you even get started. So when you get to that step, you're not sitting there messing around with everything and then plugging it in. You just take it and plug it straight in. The other thing is, I would highly recommend, if you're doing this, even with 2 people, that you get some boxes, something heavy to put at the base of this thing to keep the pieces from falling over while you're trying to put it together. You know, once 2 or 3 pieces, you know, you put a hand on each. Once you get 4, 5, 6 pieces on there, you know, you're really kind of spread out, and it's kind of strange because, like, some of the narrow pieces, like yay big, have got 2 dowels to hold them up. You can basically plug those in and take your hands off, and they're fine. They'll lean in a little bit or whatever. But then, like, the base piece on this thing, which is this gigantic piece, it's the whole floor of the unit, has 1 dowel. So if you let your hands off that just falling over, that's stripping the hole out. There's also a couple of instructions that seem to be missing, that there's just steps that aren't there. So I will just say, putting this thing together was sort of not as advertised. I was expecting to spend 2.5 hours to put this together with the help of another person, and it took several hours because of trying to interpret instructions and having to, you know, sort of go and come back, trying to figure out what's going on, or have mount a monitor while somebody's just standing there. So that was definitely a disappointment. However, that said, the final product is excellent. So all of the pieces are nice and heavy duty. The whole thing together weighs close to 200 pounds, so it's really heavy duty. It's got the base piece is this one construction, and then the top with the monitor mounting in it is a separate piece. It just got basically 3 screws to hold it in, so if you ever need to take it apart to move. It has a lit marquee, and you can swap out the marquee. So Rec Room Masters, the company that makes this cabinet, makes this kit, they have a service where you can send them any custom design and have it printed. So the default one is just this like MAME arcade or whatever kind of thing. Obviously, I wanted an 8-bit horse one, so they designed an 8-bit horse arcade marquee. They print it on translucent vinyl, ship it to you, and you just roll it out and slide it in there. It's pretty easy. You just take the top off. Access to the monitor is pretty good as well, so if you need to get in and adjust the monitor up and down, because when you're putting it together on the floor, it's hard to tell exactly where you want the monitor placed. Once you've got it in and turned on and you're playing it and you notice, hey, there's like a little space all the way across the top because I didn't predict exactly what my eye level was going to be. It's not too bad to fix that. You take a couple pieces out of the back and you can basically loosen the screws and kind of slide it up and down. The monitor bezel is very nice, so it's classic, arcade style, so you get like a little bit of a reflection going on, a little bit of double image, but it's like that's exactly the way the games were played in the arcade anyway. Another thing that's really nice about the cabinet is the stick itself. So it's a real arcade stick. So it's got all the buttons are real arcade buttons. If you're super savvy with that kind of stuff, you can take it apart and actually swap everything out if you want lit buttons. What's really nice about having the trackball is the trackball actually works as a mouse by default. So you basically can just use the trackball as your mouse, and then you've got a mouse left and a mouse right button on the top row of buttons up there. So if you wanted to, you could just boot up Windows and move around and do all that kind of thing. There's also a keyboard drawer in here, which it's great because you can't even tell it's there. If you don't know it's there, it's not clear that that's built in. But there's a keyboard drawer in there, so if you needed to access any Windows functions, you can put a wireless keyboard and mouse in there, navigate around, do all those kinds of functions. I added some LED lights along the back just for like a little extra oomph. So, I've got this light here. It used to be back in this corner, but there's, the bezel creates a lot of glare, so I moved the light up to the front. But even still, like, I wanted to be able to play with the lights out. And with the black buttons and everything, turning the lights out, it was just too dark in here to do that. So, I added LEDs. They're lit blue. Once again, I like blue. But they're just a regular LED strip that I got off Amazon. There's a little remote, so they'll change to any color. You can cycle through colors, whatever. And I've got them turned up as bright as they go, so you can turn out the lights and it gives you just enough indirect light to still see everything. It really emphasizes the outline of the cabinet. It looks really, really good with the rest of the stuff I have in the game room, and it adds to that experience. It just looks great in the room. And then there's a big open area in the bottom to put whatever you want in there. So if you want to put a console in there, if you want to put a PC in there, whatever you want. Of course, I put speakers and a subwoofer. There's also a spot in the top here to put speakers that aim down through, so you get that nice blast of sound in the face. So because the controller is a USB hookup, any PC or console that will just take a USB plug-in, you just plug it in and you're generally good to go. Xbox 360 and those kinds of systems that have a downloadable service. So you've got, Namco Museum, which is available for probably every platform ever made. You've got stuff in here, so you've got Galaga Legions, you've got Pac-Man Championship Edition. Those are great games to play in an arcade format, and of course, if you've got an Xbox 360 or whatever in there, you can download Xbox Live Arcade games. If you have a PC in here, of course, you can hook up your Steam account, and any of the arcade games that are available for Steam, you just download them and play them right here. There's lots of stuff, and there's lots of PC-specific games. So, like, I've got IREM Arcade Hits, which has a whole bunch of the IREM classic games on there. I've been running in the hunt throughout the course of this video here. There's just loads and loads and loads of stuff out there that you can play, and of course you can play through emulation as well. There's plenty of forums for you to figure out how to do all that, but you can run anything you want on here. And if you are running through emulation, something that will be really helpful for an arcade setup like this is to get a front end. So a front end is basically like a media manager. It doesn't run any games. There's no emulation capability built into it. What it does is it accesses your other emulators, and you basically, it outputs the games to a list, and you cycle through the list with the controllers on the cabinet. You may need to do a little bit of setup to get that going, but a lot of them are pre-configured to the MAME controls, which means you're still kind of plug and play. You cycle through the game you want, you hit the start button, and what it does is it tells that emulator to fire up that game. And all you do is you set up each emulator the way that you want it. So if you've got a specific resolution you want to play at, if you want to run it full screen, for the cleanest view, even if you've got like black bars on either side, you probably want to go full screen, and then you can configure an exit button so you hit the button and exit back out. It's really nice to have that kind of a thing as a front end so that you're not going through Windows and double clicking or having to break the keyboard out. This lets you cycle through all the systems and go up and down and just pick the games that you want to play. So that is basically the whole arcade cabinet. I will say I'm very, very happy. I was very frustrated on my first day when I got it in and unpacked it and had to go through so much effort to put it together. But final product, it looks just the way I want it to look. The joysticks, everything's very responsive, very well put together. Arcade games, this is still the best way to experience those. So that's what we got for you this time. We'll be back at some point. God only knows. At some point we'll make more videos, but until then, we'll see you next time.